What happens when the impossible becomes reality? April 18, 1942. American bombers appeared over Tokyo, a city that was supposed to be untouchable. One Japanese admiral made a prediction that day, a warning so terrifying that it haunted his colleagues for the rest of the war. By the end of this story, you'll understand exactly what he saw that no one else could, and why his words sealed Japan's fate. Air raid sirens wailed across Tokyo at noon on April 18, 1942. Japanese officers stopped mid-stride and looked skyward in absolute disbelief. American B-25 Mitchell bombers were flying directly over their capital city. The sight was impossible, incomprehensible. Every military expert, every strategic analyst, every intelligence briefing had declared this scenario categorically impossible. The United States possessed no air bases anywhere within 2,000 miles of Tokyo. Their aircraft carriers were far too small to accommodate heavy bombers like the B-25. The physics alone seemed to forbid it. The weight of these massive aircraft, their wingspan, the required runway length for takeoff, none of it should have worked from a carrier deck. Yet there they were, undeniably real. 16 American bombers carving paths through Japanese airspace, their bomb bay doors opening, their payloads dropping on factories, oil refineries, steel mills, and military installations scattered across the city. Some bombs fell dangerously close to the sacred imperial palace, the residence of Emperor Hirohito himself. For months, Japanese citizens had been repeatedly assured by their government and military leaders that the homeland was absolutely secure, protected by thousands of miles of Pacific Ocean, guarded by the most powerful navy in the world. Children played in the streets without fear. Factories operated at full capacity, churning out weapons and supplies for the expanding empire. The war seemed distant, remote, something happening to other people in faraway places across Southeast Asia. Now, as flames erupted from industrial complexes and thick black smoke billowed into the clear afternoon sky, that comfortable illusion of invulnerability shattered into pieces. Within just 60 minutes of the first bomb strike, an emergency meeting of the highest importance was summoned. Japan's most senior military commanders rushed to headquarters, their faces grim, their minds racing with implications. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto entered the conference room first. Officers who witnessed his arrival would later recall that his face had turned pale as fresh snow. What he was about to tell his colleagues would fundamentally alter Japan's entire war strategy and set in motion events that would determine the outcome of the Pacific War. But the question everyone desperately needed answered first was devastatingly simple. How did the Americans accomplish what everyone believed was impossible? A heavy silence fell across the conference room as Admiral Yamamoto took his seat at the head of the table. Maps displaying Japan's recent Pacific victories covered every available wall surface. Detailed charts showed their rapidly expanding conquered territories, stretching from the Philippines to Singapore, from Malaysia to the Dutch East Indies. Just 5 months earlier, on December 7, 1941, they had executed a devastating surprise attack on Pearl Harbor and crippled the American Pacific Fleet. Japanese forces had seemed unstoppable, invincible. Military victory after military victory. But today, the atmosphere in this room felt fundamentally, ominously different. General Sugiyama spoke first, his normally commanding voice betraying a slight tremor that veteran officers in attendance had never heard before. How did American bombers reach Tokyo? What catastrophic failure in our defensive network allowed this penetration of our homeland? Intelligence officers frantically sorted through preliminary damage reports and eyewitness accounts, desperately trying to piece together a coherent explanation for what had just occurred. The material damage from the raid wasn't catastrophic when measured in purely military terms. Approximately 50 people had been killed. Some buildings had sustained damage that could be repaired. Compared to Japan's own devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, which had killed over 2,400 Americans and destroyed or damaged 8 battleships, The Doolittle raid seemed almost insignificant in its physical impact. But everyone seated in that conference room understood instinctively, viscerally, that the physical damage was completely irrelevant. The psychological impact was absolutely catastrophic. America had touched Japanese soil. The sacred homeland, the place every soldier had sworn sacred oaths to defend with his life, had been violated by enemy bombers. Emperor Hirohito himself had personally demanded immediate explanations. His trusted military advisors had repeatedly promised him absolute security, had guaranteed that no enemy forces would ever threaten the home islands. That solemn promise now lay in ruins, just like the burning factories visible from the conference room windows. Yamamoto stood slowly and walked deliberately to the largest map mounted on the wall. What he said next made every officer in the room freeze in place, their blood running cold with the implications. Yamamoto's voice cut through the rising panic with calm precision. Gentlemen, they launched these bombers from aircraft carriers, probably positioned approximately 600 to 650 miles offshore. The room instantly erupted. Impossible, multiple officers shouted. B-25 bombers are far too heavy to take off from carrier decks. The runway is far too short. But they did accomplish exactly that, Yamamoto continued, which means the United States is significantly more dangerous than we calculated. Unlike most colleagues in that room, Yamamoto possessed direct experience with America. He had studied at Harvard University. He had traveled extensively across the United States. He had witnessed firsthand the nation's staggering industrial capacity, their seemingly limitless resources, their technological sophistication, and the fierce determination of the American people. Before the war began, Yamamoto had warned his superiors with chilling accuracy. I can guarantee to run wild for 6 months, perhaps a year. After that, I have no confidence in our prospects for victory. Now, only 5 months after Pearl Harbor, his dire prediction was already manifesting. The Americans weren't waiting to rebuild. They were striking back with stunning innovation that surprised even Yamamoto. But what truly terrified him wasn't the raid itself, wasn't the physical damage to Tokyo. What chilled him was what this revealed about American psychology. This proves something crucial about our enemy, he said quietly. They will never surrender. Even when victory appears impossible, they will find methods to strike back at us. Another admiral interrupted impatiently. The actual damage was minimal, he protested. Why should we be so concerned about just 16 bombers? Yamamoto turned from the map, his expression grave. Because this isn't about physical damage, he explained carefully. Our entire defensive strategy has been predicated on one assumption: distance. The Pacific Ocean protecting our shores. Our population believing they are safe from attack. That belief has now been shattered. Japanese citizens witnessed American planes over Tokyo with their own eyes. They felt American bombs exploding. They watched smoke rise from burning buildings. Public morale will fracture, Yamamoto warned. Our citizens will demand protection. We will be forced to pull fighter aircraft back from frontline positions to defend the homeland. Resources would be diverted. Defensive installations strengthened. All because 16 bombers caused minimal physical damage. The psychological and strategic impact was immeasurable. But intelligence officers had just discovered something even more disturbing about the attack. After bombing Tokyo, the American aircraft flew west toward China. Yamamoto understood immediately what this meant. They're not planning to return, Yamamoto said quietly. They knew this was a one-way mission. They came anyway. That fact revealed something terrifying about American resolve. These 80 volunteers had accepted a suicide mission. They launched knowing they lacked fuel to return. They bombed Tokyo, knowing they would crash land in occupied China, where Japanese forces might capture them. They came anyway. The raid exposed another uncomfortable truth. Japan's elaborate coastal defense network had completely failed. They had spent millions on radar installations, naval picket boats, and fighter patrols, None of it prevented this attack. Our patrol vessels were positioned too close to shore, officers reported. American carriers stayed beyond our detection range. The defensive perimeter they considered impenetrable had been easily bypassed. Later that day, Yamamoto was summoned to the imperial palace. Emperor Hirohito rarely spoke directly with commanders. This meant the situation was critical. Emperor Hirohito waited in a private chamber. Yamamoto entered and bowed deeply. The emperor's voice was soft but cutting. "Explain to me how enemy aircraft bombed my capital." Yamamoto provided the technical explanation. "Your Majesty, the Americans launched modified bombers from carriers beyond our defensive perimeter." The emperor asked about Japan's defenses. What happened? This was the dreaded question. Japan had invested enormous resources in coastal protection. All of it failed. "Our patrol boats were positioned too close to shore," Yamamoto admitted. "American carriers stayed beyond our detection capabilities." The emperor's face remained emotionless, but his next question cut deep. "Can they do this again?" Heavy silence. "Yes, Your Majesty," Yamamoto finally answered, "unless we take drastic action." What action? Yamamoto took a deep breath. What he proposed would change everything. "We must extend our defensive perimeter," Yamamoto explained. "Push it 1,000 miles east. We need to capture Midway Island. It's the key to controlling the Central Pacific. If we hold Midway, American carriers cannot get close enough to strike us again." This was the pivotal moment, the decision that would seal Japan's fate. Emperor Hirohito spoke a single phrase. "Do it." Yamamoto left carrying orders to plan the Midway operation. Japan's largest naval force ever assembled. Every available carrier, battleship, cruiser, and destroyer would participate. They would crush American naval power in one decisive battle. But there was a critical problem Yamamoto didn't know about. American codebreakers had cracked Japanese naval codes. They had been reading encrypted messages for weeks. Every plan, every ship movement, every strategy. When Yamamoto began planning Midway, American intelligence knew almost immediately. They started preparing their trap. Meanwhile, Japanese commanders made several critical errors after the Doolittle raid, each mistake driven by wounded pride. They refused to believe America could sustain offensive operations. Leaders insisted the raid was a lucky anomaly. They increased homeland defense, weakening Pacific positions. They rushed the Midway operation instead of planning carefully. They underestimated American determination. All because of one raid. 16 bombers. Minimal damage. But the psychological wound was fatal. Yamamoto understood what the Doolittle raid truly meant. It wasn't about bombs or buildings. It was a message, simple and clear. The message was unmistakable. We are coming for you. No matter how far. No matter how difficult. We will find a way to strike. That message terrified Yamamoto because he understood American industrial capacity. He had seen their factories, witnessed their resources, observed their technological innovation. He knew something else he had never fully shared with his officers. Something he'd been dreading since December 7, 1941. Before the war, Yamamoto had expressed deep concern in private correspondence that Japan had awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with terrible resolve. The Doolittle raid proved his fears justified. That sleeping giant was now fully awake. And furious. Japan dominated the first 6 months, exactly as Yamamoto predicted. Pearl Harbor, Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia, Dutch East Indies. Japanese forces seemed unstoppable, but the tide was turning. The Doolittle raid was just the beginning. 6 weeks later came Midway, Japan's first catastrophic defeat. 4 carriers sunk in one day, their naval advantage destroyed forever. After Midway came Guadalcanal, then island after island. Americans pushed forward relentlessly, exactly as Yamamoto feared. Historians frequently debate one question about the Pacific War. When did Japan truly lose World War II? Some historians cite Midway in June 1942, when Japan lost 4 irreplaceable carriers. Others point to the atomic bombings in August 1945, but many believe the turning point was April 18, 1942, the day 16 bombers appeared over Tokyo, the day Japan's invincibility died. Japanese High Command's reaction fundamentally changed everything. Their panicked response sparked the disastrous Midway operation. Resources were pulled for homeland defense, weakening Pacific positions. Their strategic shift after the Doolittle raid accelerated their defeat. One raid, 8 minutes over Tokyo. A war transformed. The raid demonstrated what terrified Yamamoto. America would not quit. America would not accept defeat. America would find solutions to impossible problems. Those 80 raiders proved American forces would take extraordinary risks. The raid boosted morale when America desperately needed victory. It showed the world Japan was vulnerable, and it forced Japan into catastrophic strategic decisions. Yamamoto's prediction wasn't just prophetic. It was a death sentence for imperial Japan. The giant was awake, angry, and possessed the industrial might to grind Japan into submission. 16 bombers changed history, not through destruction, but through the message they delivered. The Doolittle raid stands as one of history's most remarkable military operations, not for damage inflicted, but for what it represented. Courage against impossible odds. Innovation when conventional wisdom said it couldn't be done. A message that America would never stop fighting. Those 80 raiders changed the Pacific War. They gave America hope. They forced Japan into fatal mistakes. They proved that sometimes the most important victories aren't measured in bombs dropped, but in psychological impact and strategic consequences. If you found this story fascinating, subscribe for more untold World War II stories. Hit that like button if you learned something new. Drop a comment telling me what other stories you'd like explored. The past has incredible stories waiting to be told. Let's discover them together.